Among a handful of magnificent truth tellers, I'll use that word again, that have been with us to address all three of the Western Conservative Summits, is Frank Gaffney. He founded and still heads after 20-some years an organization that he established upon leaving the national security ranks of the Reagan administration because he knew a voice like this would be needed in Washington. The Center for Security Policy, the lead editor of an important book called The Report of Team B, The Threat of Sharia. He'll be signing that afterward outside as well. And most recently, the author of a remarkable online course to wake up America as it is now minutes to midnight with that threat of Islam. Please welcome back for the third consecutive year with a compelling, important message that will rivet you and I hope move you to action, our friend Dr. Frank Gaffney.
Thank you. Well, you've had a full afternoon, as my friend John says. Dr. Coburn said he would prescribe Prozac after his address. After Phil's, I think morphine is probably in order, and you may be wanting cyanide after mine. Actually, that's a joke. Don't do it. We need your help. I'm going to race through about probably 25 minutes worth of material in 15, because that's what I've been allotted, and I don't want to steal a minute from one of the men I admire most in the world, Geert Wilders. You will be treated to a profile in courage here, and I'll get out of the way as quickly as possible, but I do want to tell you about the piece of the problem with the Obama administration and with our country at the moment that Phil didn't cover. And that is the national security piece. And I'm going to go through, as I say, very quickly some slides with you here that will explain a couple of things. And I'm going to start with the first slides. Let me have the opening, and a series of, well, pictures that I'm going to ask you what's wrong with them. Next slide. This, of course, is Mohamed Morsi. He is now the president of Egypt. He is a radical Islamist, a Muslim brother, a man who seeks to impose Sharia on his own people and, as part of the Brotherhood, on everybody else. We have helped him come to power. We have also transferred to his government, as recently as a month ago, to maybe now, $1.5 billion, no strings attached, no conditionality, lump sum, do with it as they will. What will they do with it? One of the things, next slide, we're going to see a lot more from Mr. Morsi and his friends, including this fellow, Hani Noor el-Din, a terrorist who was given a visa by the Obama administration to come in and petition them to let the guy on the right go. The guy on the right, of course, is the blind sheikh, the man who conspired to blow up the World Trade Center the first time, and also a number of other places in New York City, and is still calling on his co-religionists, his fellow adherents to Sharia, to kill Americans. The fact that the Obama administration is even dignifying this request, let alone actively considering it, is scandalous, but symptomatic. Next slide. This is one of my favorite pictures. It's, of course, next slide, if we can there. It's really not captioned what's left of our counterintelligence capabilities in the FBI, but it should be. Because now we have the Muslim Brotherhood telling us what we can know, what we can train to, who we can use as trainers. Did you know that? 700 documents have been shredded under Mr. Mueller's direction, 300 briefings, because they might give offense to the Muslim Brotherhood. And now we're consulting with them about making sure that we don't do that. This would be, I'm of a certain age, as some of you are, like having the KGB tell us what we can know and think and do about Soviet communism. It's madness. Next slide. This gentleman, of course, you're familiar with, but did you know he was involved in workplace violence? Yes. That's the finding of an after-action report being tried in connection with that kind of thing, killing 14 of our countrymen, wounding many others. Today, you may have heard that the Department of Homeland Security would advise those who shot him and kept him from killing God only knows how many more. Today, they're being advised, in the event they're faced with a shooter, to run and hide. If all else fails, to throw something at them. I don't know about you, but I'm entirely with the Border Patrol folks who are crazed about this kind of direction. So, obviously, next slide, please. Something's wrong here. But what is it? Next slide. I'm going to argue if we simply connect the dots, it becomes pretty clear pretty quickly. Next slide. We have, as John mentioned, published a book, a man that I had the privilege of introducing to you 2 years ago here, Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin, one of our great national heroes, co-led the team that put this together. This is the most important thing I've been involved in, I think, for 24 years, with the possible exception of the next slide, which is something we put out just earlier this year in April. It is a free course. You can, by the way, get the book for free, too. I'd love to sell it to you and sign one, but you can get it downloaded for free if you want. You can take this course for free at MuslimBrotherhoodInAmerica.com. Yes, that's right. They're in America. And I think that helps explain some of those otherwise inexplicable things I just showed you. What are they trying to do, the Muslim Brotherhood? Next slide. Well, they're trying to promote Sharia. What is Sharia? Sharia is a comprehensive, totalitarian, supremacist doctrine that is at the core of mainstream Islam. Let me hasten to add, and this might counter what John just said, but I believe firmly, because not all Muslims embrace, practice, or seek to impose Sharia on the rest of us, they're not the problem. But those in Islam who do, unmistakably are. They are, as I've mentioned, brutally repressive. They are particularly horrific to women, to religious minorities, to homosexuals, to artists, to others who are living beings, as a practical matter, just about everybody, other than them. And the trouble is, they seek, as I said, to impose this doctrine worldwide. And in fact, next slide, the Brotherhood is the driving force internationally now, not just in Egypt, or Tunisia, or Libya, or shortly probably in Syria, maybe Bahrain, Yemen, Jordan, perhaps Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, who knows, where all else. But also elsewhere in the world. And sadly, yes, including here. Next slide. Don't take my word for it. This is the strategic plan, the mission statement of the Muslim Brotherhood in America. Dated 1991, drafted by one of the top Muslim brothers, Muhammad Akram. It defines its purpose as destroying us from within by our hands. Make no mistake about this. These are not people with whom we can safely do business, let alone empower, enrich, or turn over critical national security decisions and capabilities to. Now, the trouble is, according to this strategic plan, they operate in phases, starting with a secret establishment of leadership and building out to be more and more aggressive. Phase 2 involves penetrating the government. And I want to just share with you some of the insights from our course, MuslimBrotherhoodInAmerica.com, as to the success they've had in doing that. Which doesn't explain everything about what we're confronting today, but it helps explain a lot. Let's start with the next slide, someone who was lit up by Rush Limbaugh this week. Ever heard of her? Homa Abedin, also known as Mrs. Anthony Weiner, is the Deputy Chief of Staff to the Secretary of State. A friend of mine who was a former senior official in the State Department says she's actually the closest aide in the entire State Department because she's the one who travels with Mrs. Clinton all the time. People with much more exalted titles may see her every week or two. She's there every day, day in, day out. Homa Abedin, as Rush Limbaugh pointed out, is tied in numerous ways to the Muslim Brotherhood. Her father, her mother, her brother, all have been active in Islamist organizations, including her mother as a leading figure in the Muslim Sisterhood. Rush pointed out she's close to another Muslim sister, the wife, the first lady now of Mohammed Morsi in Egypt. Sadly, folks, as we point out, next slide, in our course, Homa Abedin is not the only one. These are just 6 that we've done dossiers on, some of whom are actually working on the government payroll, others are advisors, others are being used for liaison or outreach to the Muslim American community. I encourage you to look into them and their backgrounds. If you want to know what is wrong with these pictures, what is wrong with the Obama administration's embrace, empowering, enabling of this mortal threat elsewhere and here, part of the answer, of course, lies with the president himself and his own proclivities in this department. But part of it is the fact he's surrounded himself and put into senior positions and influencers in agencies throughout his government. We need to root them out. A first step, next slide, a first step in that direction, very important, I believe, has been taken by these 5 members of Congress, led by Michelle Bachmann, who's addressed us here before, and 4 others. Congressman Louis Gohmert of Texas, Congressman Trent Franks of Arizona, Congressman Lynn Westmoreland of Georgia, Congressman Tom Rooney of Florida, have taken a very courageous step calling for formal investigations on the basis of our course for the inspectors general of 5 departments to look into these people and the role they're playing inside the wire and the extent to which it is having a subversive effect on policy. They've been asked to report back by the middle of September. I hope they will. And if they don't, we better be holding them accountable and hoping that there will be congressional inquiries made in these areas as well. Next slide. I feel constrained to tell you very quickly that this problem is not unique to the Obama administration. Next slide, please. The penetration began before it came to office. It has enabled it to be as dangerous as it is, though. Next slide, please. It started in a serious way in the Clinton administration. You know the 2 guys on the ends. The guy in the middle you may not know, though he's actually a resident at the moment of this fair state. Yes, folks, he's living in Supermax, serving what was initially a 23-year federal prison sentence on terrorism charges. And this chap, the Clinton administration, thought fit to have create and select and train and credential chaplains for the United States military and the U.S. prison system. He's in prison. His chaplains, I'm afraid, are still at work, which is kind of a problem. Next slide. This is also kind of a problem. In 1998, that same fellow, a top Muslim Brotherhood figure, an Al-Qaeda financier, lashed up with a guy most of you know and think of as a great American conservative for his work on tax issues, Grover Norquist. He started with him something called the Islamic Free Market Institute. I happen to have tumbled upon this because I wound up renting space from Grover Norquist for 7 long years and witnessed firsthand what I'm about to show you in terms of the influence operation that began during that period, went at the George W. Bush 2000 campaign, and then the Bush administration, again, setting the precedents in terms of personnel, policy, and practices that are metastasizing today. Next slide. Another gang of 6. You've already been introduced to Abdurrahman Alamoudi. Let me very quickly go through just some photographs of the rest. Next slide. Next, well, this is Alamoudi with then Governor Bush and the campaign. Next slide. This is Khalid Safuri, his right-hand man, and Nihad Awad, who runs one of the most aggressive of the Muslim Brotherhood fronts, CARE, with the president in September 2001. This is Samuel Arian, another convicted terrorist, running at the time of this photograph in March of 2000, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad organization. Next slide. Muzamil Siddiqui, one of the most prominent Muslim brothers, an aggressive Sharia-adherent imam, presenting the president a Quran in the White House shortly after 9/11. Next slide. This chap, Suhail Khan. Suhail Khan worked in the White House for most of 2001. He was the Muslim gatekeeper there, facilitated most of those photographs that you just saw there. He's currently on the board of directors of the American Conservative Union, the organization that is bringing CPAC here. Past practice is any guide, he will appear here. He will maybe do as he did in Washington in February, lead the Pledge of Allegiance. All arranged and orchestrated, I'm sorry to say, by Grover Norquist for the purpose of promoting a man that I believe, if you take a look at part 4 of the course, MuslimBrotherhoodInAmerica.com, you will have no illusion but that both by virtue of the fact that his parents started 3 of the top Muslim Brotherhood organizations in the United States, and he has been involved with them from that day to this, working on their agendas, working with their operatives, and promoting, in other words, the cause of what he calls the Ummah, to which he has pledged his life. Now, ladies and gentlemen, a matter of personal pride, if I may, before I get the cane. Next slide. This is almost the end. These guys are coming here. Cleta Mitchell wrote a scathing memorandum attacking me for what you've just seen and exonerating Grover Norquist and Suhail Khan. It was approved by the board of the American Conservative Union. It is fundamentally wrong. It is an embarrassment to that organization. It is a blight on our movement. And I would urge all of you who heard last night the appeal to attend the meeting here to make it conditional. To call on Al Cardenas, who I admire greatly, and I think he's trying to do the right thing in that organization, to clean house before they come to Denver. Last point. Next slide. Why is this so important? Because this man is being targeted now by this same influence operation. I think everyone in this room knows how important it is that he win. I believe his chances of winning are immensely improved if he calls Barack Obama out on what he's doing to enable the subversion, the destruction of this country from within, not least because I believe women in this country, about whom we're hearing a lot lately, especially as there may be a gender gap working against President or Governor Romney for President Obama. Well, helping women in this country, Democratic women, independent women, Republican women, understand what the mortal peril will be to them and to their families if this kind of operation succeeds in bringing Sharia here, which is its explicit purpose, then I think Governor Romney has a far better chance of actually winning this election handsomely, which is what we need. Last thing, last thing. Last slide, please. I want to leave you with this thought. There are many ways in which you can help. I'd be happy to discuss them with you as I sign your book or as you take the course about which this is part 10. But last slide, please. Take this away from this meeting, if nothing else. In 1961, my former boss said the following: freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We don't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on to our children to do the same. Or we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was like to live in the United States where men were free. Let's not let that happen. Thank you.
Frank Gaffney, Center for Security Policy. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a patriot. This man is fearless. He is selfless. He is devoted. He is relentless. Agree or disagree with all of the conclusions and lines of inference that he has just shared with us, which are spelled out in so much more detail in his book and his online course. Agree or disagree, we can only be immensely indebted to you, Frank Gaffney, patriot, for raising the right questions that others fear to raise.